Hey there, guys, and welcome to another Factorio Friday Facts number 227, and I am with Scarhoof again.
Hello, everyone.
How are you doing?
Oh, excellent.
Excellent. Same here. So, Rendering Trees and Scenario Talk. This is written by Posila, Ernestes, and Clonin. So, another week has passed with part of the team still out in Taiwan. They should be back next week with some news of the great adventure. So, rendering/VRAM optimizations. I'm going to mostly summarize this. There were some parts I didn't understand, but even the parts I did, it's still just pretty technical. So essentially, with the addition of the high-res sprites and graphics, it's like really bumped up the amount of VRAM you need. Currently, the game requires about 2.4 gigabytes of VRAM for sprites alone, and then it can use a couple hundred megabytes more for working buffers in minimap data. So while trying to optimize rendering, they learned that the issue is quite complicated, as one optimization could be an improvement for one PC, but then actually hurt things worse for a PC of different configuration or similar. So it's really complicated, essentially. And I'm just browsing through here. It was using so-called sprite atlases, which are big textures with lots of individual sprites packed into them. The advantage of using them is that we can batch rendering of sprites that are in the same atlas and reduce the total CPU overhead of creating many draw commands for the GPU. A disadvantage is that it might be harder for graphics drivers to fit this single large texture into VRAM as opposed to a lot of small ones. They say, terrain tiles, shadows, GUI graphics, icons, and recently objects that are drawn under shadows are all separated into their own atlas. Another problem is related to texture sampling. That when you zoom out a lot, an entity which was 256 pixels wide could be only 32 pixels wide, which means only every 8th pixel from the source sprite is drawn. This can be a problem for GPU texture cache and cause significant frame rate drops when zooming out, which I think a lot of us have experienced, or
Oh yeah, for sure.
Seen. Yeah. So pretty much, with the ever-increasing amount of high-resolution textures, we have some plans to implement some stronger VRAM optimizations later on. We will have some news on these as we develop them, but one way which coincides nicely with the high-resolution update is splitting of sprites from their shadows, which brings us to trees. So currently, the trees are kept as single sprites with the tree and tree shadow combined. We thought this would be a benefit as it would reduce the number of sprites the game has to render by half, but in the case of trees, this leads to a lot of empty space in the sprite image.
Yeah, this is a fascinating little diagram. So the green is the tree, the blue is the shadow, and then, you got your Venn diagram there in the center, but then all of that orange stuff is stuff that's taken, it's just blank space that's taking up VRAM.
Yeah, because the VRAM, this still has to be entirely rendered. The whole thing, even the empty spaces. So what they're planning on doing is splitting them, right? So it can take up less room, but it has some side effects due to overlapping shadow sprites all being merged before being rendered. This means there will no longer be the deep black areas where the old tree shadows would layer on each other, which we can see in this image here. This helps the terrain fit more naturally with the trees and helps keep the darkness of shadow consistent with other entities, but has some downsides. By removing the black areas, the resulting scene tends to be much more flat, which I would definitely agree. You can see a pretty stark difference here.
Now, the one on the left is the current game, right?
No, I think the one on the left is what they would be proposing. I think.
Oh, okay.
Because they say that how it is now, it creates the really dark shadows.
Yeah.
I think.
I like the one on the right better.
Yeah, me too. Much better. By removing the deep black areas, the resulting scene tends to look more... so we can counter this problem by adding deeper shadows to the sprite itself, but this only works for trees using volumetric leaves, so we are reworking all trees to work with this new system, which is good. This is a cool little scene they set up here with the rock and the forest. So yeah, pretty much VRAM stuff. They're trying to improve it. I would say that with the high-res textures, which you can toggle on and off if you didn't know, I would say that it is actually very high VRAM usage for what you would expect for Factorio. It's kind of really lopsided in my opinion, because the rest of the game can be run on like a 6-year-old laptop.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you need like a modern, within like the last couple of years, graphics card that's like $200 or $300 to actually run high-res sprites.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, again, you can just do the normal res, low res sprites and be good to go. But if you want the high res sprites, you need to pretty much have a pretty modern CPU. I mean, you need a card with probably at least 3 or 4 gig. I would say, to be safe, 4 gigs or more VRAM, which aren't exactly cheap.
Right.
So I'm glad they're working on that. So scenarios and competitive scenarios. This is from Clonin. So essentially, as a summary, if you didn't know, there are scenarios, PvP, competitive, and other scenarios bundled into the game. If you go to the scenarios thing, and there's free play, PvP, sandbox, supply challenge, team production, and wave defense. And then, he says the most interesting to me is exploring the nature of competitive Factorio. This doesn't necessarily mean fighting, killing each other, toxic, cutthroat competition. So not League of Legends, but giving that heart-racing, high-paced action that you don't really find in the rest of the game. So there's two scenarios of competitive nature. There's team production, which are teams are given a small area to work and a random task to fulfill. Which have you played that?
I have not.
Okay. I played it briefly, and it was okay. I mean, I wasn't like super impressed, like just because my personal taste, I wasn't really thrilled about the random task thing. Mm-hmm. But this is what I've been playing a ton of this, the PvP, and there's in the PvP, and this is what gets a lot of people, like the team production. It's called production too. The production challenge that I've been doing a lot of within the PvP scenario. There's multiple things you can set up in there. And this is really fun. So, essentially, just the fact you're working against other players and just the competitive nature of it and in going against other players and stuff really adds kind of an interesting feel to the game, which personally I have greatly enjoyed. I'm like super obsessed with this mode because he talks about it on the production. Well, somewhere in here he talks about it, but essentially what he says is the production challenge score thing, production score challenge in the PvP is each team gets a base and like an empty area, an enclosed area with resources and stuff, and you build a base. However, in this, every single item is assigned a point value, and like consuming an item.
The production score, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, every item is so the concept is simple. You'll earn points for the amount of items your factory produces, and teams will compete to earn the most points. Generally, things is quite nice as teams can compete somewhat indirectly with one another, and victory isn't solely dependent on military power, which is cool. However, you can mix in actual combat within this mode as well if you want.
Yeah.
Part of this result is that the price generator I developed can be used for other things that is done in a general way, so it will dynamically calculate new recipes when mods and other things are considered. Nice graphs such as the following. So there's a list of...
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you can make like 5 atomic bombs, or you could just try to pump out the long-handed inserters.
Just like tons of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And... It's a really interesting mode. I encourage you guys to check it out, or watch some of the VODs for the streams or videos that I've done or other people have done, because it's really, really fun, because there's a lot of strategy, because it depends on the game length too. Like, are you going to have time to get and research an atomic bomb or Coverx process, or would you be better off just mass producing barrels or something?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting. So to kind of conclude, scenarios as mods, he said he's seen some issues raised that there's no easy way to share and install scenarios. Really, that is quite true for standalone scenarios, as you will need to copy the folder into some other scenario folder which might not exist in the user directory. Or you can join a server hosting the scenario already and save a copy. So thankfully, there's a very easy solution, and that is pack your scenario into a mod. This essentially solves the problem of scenario distribution and makes it as simple as adding any other community addition to the game. There's also the system that mods that include only local campaigns and scenarios are marked as non-game changing, since it doesn't affect the state of the game, which is interesting. and is completely ignored when dealing with mod syncing. But also up here, he asks if people have any ideas. So if you guys do have ideas, go to the forums or leave them down below for our interest as well. Do you have any ideas for new scenarios or improvements to the current ones? What scenarios and events would you like to see or take part in? Do you think developing a competitive aspect of Factorio will benefit us in the long run? So, what do you think? Do you think that would be interesting, or do you think Factorio should just remain? Yeah.
No, I think that's really cool stuff. Anytime you can get the community involved, because they have much more brain power than like the developers. It's just fascinating seeing what like Minecraft has done, right? It's just the variety of ideas that have come from the community is what makes Minecraft so amazing, and that's setting up that framework for Factorio for the community to come up with all these really cool extensible ideas is awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think more scenarios and stuff would be really cool. Some people made some cool suggestions in regards to like similar stuff to the Warcraft 3, like custom game stuff, which I played a lot of back in the day, which was really fun. And also, I think competitive Factorio, like maybe not on the nature of like esports super competitive like massive events, but like just little events or medium events, competitive stuff, I think is really interesting because it does bring a whole different dynamic to the game opposed to just building a factory to build a factory.
Right. That makes me wonder, is there a tower defense scenario?
Not the closest thing is wave defense, but you can't really do like mazes or anything like you would in a tower defense. So an actual tower defense type thing I think would be pretty awesome, except well, we have cliffs now, so those are unblow-upable. So I wonder if, like, in the scenario map, you could have kind of a route with your cliffs and then keep everything up on the cliffs and stuff. That would be... Oh, that's a really good idea. If you, like, instead of actually doing walls, because the biter's pathing with them is weird.
Them. Yeah,
is if someone created a custom map where the path is... Because a lot of tower defense games, the path is predefined. Like, so... If someone just makes a predefined path with the cliffs and then you put your towers on top of the cliff, that would be really interesting if they could get... I feel like the biter pathing may freak out if you make it too complicated and then they'll just like sit there. But that's a really good idea you had to use the cliffs. Someone make a mode for that.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. Yeah, so I think that's going to do it. You have any other thoughts for any of this?
Nope, nothing else.
All right, that'll do it, guys. Leave your thoughts down below. We're always interested to hear them. Leave them on the forums if you have any as well. And until next time, we will...